Let's date forever. Here's your weekly dose of relationship fuel with Sammy and Nathan Yeager. Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about lessons learnt from a practice marriage, the roles that self-love plays in a relationship, the 4 agreements, and how to build habits that will stick. But before we dive into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
A couple things.
Yeah.
The first one was that we had an interstate visitor and her little kiddo.
Yeah, how nice.
Yeah, it was really nice to hang out and get to spend some time together and, yeah, really in a really unstructured way. It was super nice. But the other thing that fueled me up is that last year, 2022, I set myself a average step goal of 12,000 steps. I wanted to average 12,000 steps a day for the year, and I didn't quite make it.
No, you were like 11,800 or 11,900.
11,500.
Yeah.
So I came up short, about 500 steps a day on average short. So I've recommitted and I'm going to smash it in 2023. And as at the end of January, I'm well above average, about 14,500 daily steps. So I've been smashing my hot girl walks and feeling really good for it. What about you, Nath? What's been fueling you up?
Yeah, I had a couple of things too. So the first one was that I went on a bike ride in the Blue Mountains with a mate that I haven't been on a ride with before. So he's one of my workmates that I've worked with for about the last 7 years or something. And we knew that we were both mountain biking people and just hadn't, for whatever reason, actually gotten out.
Been busy.
Oh, must have been busy. Yeah. Just hadn't actually got out and finally, went for a ride together on the weekend. It was really, really nice. But the other thing that was fueling me up too was the last couple of years I've set myself a reading goal of how many books I want to read in a year, well, listen to on Audible. And sometimes I kind of get in this rut of listening to a book just because of the goal that I've set to try and read a certain amount of books. And it got to last week and I just wasn't really feeling any of the books that I was reading. And I was like, no, stuff it. I'm going to listen to a podcast instead, which I really enjoy. It's an investing podcast and there's just some good banter in there and really good education as well. So, listen to a few episodes of that and it's just, really kind of reignited my fire, even though my share portfolio is looking very sad at the moment.
Hashtag or asterisk, not financial advice.
That's it.
Don't take financial advice from Nathan.
Or a podcast.
Yeah. But so that means your wealth and lifestyle tank is feeling good?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's kind of both of those. Yeah, a little bit of wealth building and future proofing, but then also a little bit of lifestyle, but getting outside and relationships and network and a bit of self-tank as well. So, touching on a few things. But now, here's this week's guests.
Today we have Julie DeLucca-Collins and Dan Collins joining us. They are co-founders of Go Confidently Services. Julie is a business and life strategist coach and the host of the popular Casa DeConfidence Podcast. She's also author of the #1 best-selling book, Confident You: Simple Habits to Live the Life You've Imagined. Dan is Chief Technology Officer and podcast producer and loves to make people sound good while they deliver their message. Welcome to the show, you two.
Hi, thank you for having me and Dan, because this is a treat to be able to drag him along to an interview.
Because normally it's just you podcasting on the front end, right, Julie?
Normally it's only me being invited to interviews. When we podcast, when we do our show, Dan and I have a little conversation, but the interviews are mainly done by me. So this is a really fun experience to bring him along.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, so what that bio kind of implied but didn't outline was that you're actually married, right? You're not just business partners?
Absolutely.
Yep, that's correct.
Last time we checked, right, Dan?
Last time.
It's all legal. Absolutely. We're married. We've been married 10 years.
Oh, wow. So maybe we'll start there. Tell us a little bit about your relationship story. Where did it all start?
Where did it all start? Wow.
Wow,
Do we tell the short story or the long story?
Tell them the good story.
I'll tell them the good
spicy story.
So we were married in 2012, but we've known each other since 1992.
We were toddlers.
We're Generation X. We're the elders now. We're
proud Xers.
It kills me. But we actually met because Julie was the maid of honor at my first wedding.
That's right. It's a little scandalous.
Whoa.
So
I asked for this spicy story and it's already spicy.
It's already spicy. So the cat's out of the bag there. I mean, we have both had what we call practice spouses.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of the stuff we try to do now is help people not have practice spouses. And we say that as a little chuckle joke between ourselves, but we're not afraid to say that.
Yeah, we've known each other, you figure, since we were 21, 22. We met at such a young age. And honestly, I don't think Dan liked me. And I thought he was different, honestly. I
liked you. I just didn't like your attitude.
He thought I was very opinionated and nothing has changed through the years, but we went our different ways. He married somebody else. I married somebody else. And when he went through the divorce first, and I certainly felt so bad for him, I thought, what a nice guy. Because over the course of the years, I had thought, what a great guy he is. And wanted to set him up with all my girlfriends because he's going to be a good catch for some girl.
Did you still have a relationship with the bride, Julie?
No.
Okay. I feel like that's important context.
I started to sort of lose touch with her throughout the course of our friendship.
Yeah, the last couple of years.
The last couple of years, we had not been that close. And certainly when Dan and the bride were going through a divorce, I tried to stay friends with both of them. And I will tell you, when I went through my divorce, she was supportive. She was there for me again as a friend. But once she got married to somebody else, she had a baby, but did not like the idea of all of a sudden Dan and I evolving to having more than just a friendship. And I really had a hard time in the sense that I just feel like we have a lot of rules around what we want other people to do. And I think that I was happy that she had found someone, that she had a new family, because Dan and her did not have kids. But I felt she knew what I had gone through in my first marriage, the pain and the difficulty and sadness. And I thought, she would be happy for us. And again, we interpret everybody's reaction in different ways. So no, we are not friends, but Dan and her do sort of like move in the same circles because they work for the same company. And we wish her well. And I've seen her a couple different times. We say hello, but certainly we're not, going out and partying and hanging out a lot.
There's no animosity there or anything. That's all.
So Julie, when did you switch from trying to hook Dan up with your girlfriends to actually maybe I'm interested in that?
The one thing about Dan is that he is the kindest, sweetest guy. I think that for me, when I went through my divorce, I was convinced I was going to be the cat lady alone for the rest of my life because I didn't think I necessarily wanted to be in a relationship or couldn't think of, what the next thing would be. But the one thing that really hit me is that Dan, he said to me, hey, I know what you're going through. I know the difficulty that it is to lose the relationship, to start anew. And we started just talking and as always, being friends.
As a New Yorker, Julie was living in Manhattan. And when she left her husband, she actually went to Brooklyn. And if anybody who knows New York City, that's a big change going from Manhattan to Brooklyn. And she called me one day on her way home. She's crying. She's, in this mourning process, she's mourning the loss of that relationship. And she's like, I'm a bridge and tunnel girl. And if
because you got to make this trek across, right?
I don't want to be a bridge and tunnel girl.
Because of that commute. And that's kind of where we actually built a relationship there. She would call me. I would call her when I knew she was driving.
Or he would call me on his way to work 2 a.m. I remember the first Monday that after I moved to my Brooklyn apartment, he called me first thing in the morning and I'm thinking who calls people this early in the morning? I pick up, I'm like, hello?
Is something wrong?
That's a difference there too.
Yeah. And he's like, hi, I just wanted to let you know. And here's this chipper, happy person. It's like, it's a brand new day. It's going to be okay. And I'm thinking
well, what are you doing calling me this early?
And it was just very organic that we ended up just talking. And at one point, I think we went somewhere and he went to get me a cup of coffee. And when he came back with a cup of coffee, and my divorce at this point was final, and I thought, this guy knows how I take my coffee.
Mm.
And he pays attention to the little things. He knows the things that matter to me. And it just kind of went from there. You know, when you start dating someone, you're kind of like, oh, I'm going to show you a little bit about me. I mean, he had seen a lot about me already.
Mm.
We were good friends that knew each other very well.
So from like early 20s, where you walked down the aisle towards Dan as a bridesmaid, how long was it that you then walked down the aisle towards him as bride?
It was 20 years.
That's amazing. So I'm really curious. You both have had what you've called practice marriages, practice spouses. If there was one really big lesson that you carried from that first marriage into this marriage, what would it be?
So Julie kind of said this, and it struck a bell in my brain to remember this. And she said that a lot of time we have rules for people. And a lot of times we have rules for our spouse. And many times we're so close to a person that we think that their rules are the same as ours, but they're not. And the one thing that I learned and we implement every day is we don't have rules, we have protocols. Like we just call them something different, but they're rules with the understanding that we are allowed to speak to each other. And I know this is a corporate term, with radical candor.
Kim Scott, we love her.
Yeah.
Author of that book, Radical Candor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we understand that we can say something to each other and understand that it doesn't come from a place of negativity. I mean, sometimes, obviously,
We're human.
where everyone's human, that's going to happen. So number one is we're able to say things to each other, because those unspoken things will often drive a wedge between two individuals. And the second thing, and this goes back to the rules for other people, it's kind of a little different, is I try to keep my thoughts out of her brain. So when she says something, we as humans tend to filter it through our own experience and think that while she may say something like, hey, Dan, I saw you didn't take the garbage out this morning. And I'm thinking she's criticizing, but she's like, no, well, could be anything. She's like, hey, we got to make sure we do it next week. Or did something happen? Are you okay? Did you hurt your back? She's thinking something totally different. And just making sure you're not filtering their intentions through your filters and not being afraid to ask, what did you mean by that? And that is just a way of communicating that is learned. But if you can learn that early on and work on it, most of the bad arguments or anything like that is going to be solved. You're going to nip it in the bud before it becomes something negative.
Yeah.
So
I like that. It's like assumptions make an ass out of you and me, like that. Yeah, thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what happens a lot of the times. I think that, have you guys read the book? It's one of my favorite books, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah, I read this book last year. A couple of people had recommended it to me in quick succession. So I was like, okay, the universe is telling me now's the time to read this book. Super interesting point of view. But I liked what you said there, Dan, about not filtering and, your lens. I think building that muscle of curiosity is so important and such a great, you use the phrase perfectly, like, what did you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Help me understand what it is that you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, for sure.
Julie, what about you? What was your big one lesson that you've carried from marriage one to this one?
I'm
curious.
listening to Dan. I'm listening to Dan talk about that whole, not putting somebody else's thoughts. And I was really thinking, and I refer to this as the manuals, right? Dan is not a refrigerator. Dan is not a car that comes with a user's manual. And for me, I know that a lot of times I put expectations on him or on others based on who I am. I'm a high achiever. And that may not necessarily be how somebody else shows up. And I had to learn this in corporate America when I was an executive, that just because I'm willing to work 12 hours doesn't mean that somebody else cares less about the job or somebody has different or lesser values. It's just that you approach things differently. I think that the other thing too that I carried from my first marriage to this one is that we are responsible for our own happiness.
Yeah.
I cannot hang my hat on Dan being my source of happiness. Does he make me happy? Is being in this marriage happy? Absolutely. I love our life. And I say this to him a lot. I love our life. I do. But I don't expect him to make me love my life because of what he does. I love it because of the way that I choose to think of our life, or the ways that I choose to see what a gift it is, even in the difficult, even in the sad times. And I think that for many times we expect others to be our source of entertainment, comfort, etc. And really, does he comfort me? Absolutely. Does he hold me accountable or call me out in my bullshit when I need to? Of course. But ultimately, I am not waiting to get my worth through the relationship that I have with him. I know my worth as a person. And that's something, honestly, I don't have it together. I want to be clear on that. And if someone's out there, I'm like, oh, I got it together, then that's
glad you're speaking for yourself.
Yeah.
But I think that for many of us, we definitely have to learn our own worth before we can accept the love and worth that somebody else gives us. And I think that that's a very big thing that I learned in this marriage from my first marriage. I was hoping, if that person loved me, if that person, I would be fulfilled just by being in that relationship.
Yeah, we always like to say that the relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship that you have. So, really, you do need to understand, make yourself happy, know your wants, needs, what drives you, and all those things first before you can really get true fulfillment, I guess, out of another relationship.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and that you just can't outsource. I can't outsource the way that I take care of my self-care to Nathan. I can't outsource my physical well-being, my mental well-being, my hobbies, my interests, my relationships. Those are me and my responsibility. And I think sometimes we forget that it's not our partner's responsibility to be everything or do those things for us. There is, that sense of self is ours to create, nurture, evolve, protect, not just in this year, but every year.
Every year, absolutely. And I think that this is where we're in a place where, sadly, right, many of our friends that married young and married even not too long ago, they tend to separate. But I think that it goes back to that because we put the ownership in somebody else's shoulders for our own happiness. And I will tell you, that's really challenging for me at times to remember that it's not up to Dan to do XYZ, to take care of me or to, if I can choose for myself what I want. And if he is not on board, it's okay. He is his own person. And I need to stop putting my manual, my expectations on him to act, to be, to do a certain way.
Yeah. But like you sort of talked about already, or we already talked about one of the 4 agreements, to not make assumptions. But if anyone's got an open loop of what the 4 agreements are. So the first one is to be impeccable with your word. Number 2, don't take anything personally. Number 3, don't make assumptions. And number 4, always do your best. So Julie, it sounds like that book had some impact on you.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite books. And I'll tell you why, because I think that maybe this is not a popular opinion, but I think it should be required reading for many of us in high school. Because I think of all of the heartbreak, not only in my first marriage, but in my career and in many relationships where I made a lot of assumptions about people. And for us, it really is something that we create much more of a drama than it needs to be, honestly. Our brain is wired to really be negative. Our brain is wired to also judge us. We have this internal judge that is always working against us. But if we start to believe that things are working for ours, or that there is a gift within every circumstance, even the sad and the hard, then our perspective can change. And then what happens is when our perspective changes positively, that reticular activator in our brain starts matching up and saying, "Ooh, that's a good thing too. And that's a good thing too." And then all of a sudden that becomes contagious to the people around you. So that's one of the reasons I love that book so much.
Yeah. And that hindsight thing is such a gift, isn't it? Because when I reflect back on my life, like some of the things that in the moment, I thought were like the shittiest, hardest, most uncomfortable, devastating experiences have turned out to be like the most amazing, like post-traumatic growth, like opportunities. Like, where I got made redundant 1 day shy of 1 year. So I got nothing as a result of this redundancy. But that redundancy, when I look back on it, that was like a real fork in the road moment for me where my whole life changed direction because of the decisions that I made after that experience. Nathan and I ended up like moving as a result of that and drastically changing our life. But while I was in the thick of it, gosh, it was not nice. It wasn't pleasant. It wasn't easy, and it was confusing and uncomfortable, and there was struggle. But yeah, now when I have those kinds of experiences, I really do think of it as like, okay, this is not happening to me. This is happening for me. And what is it that I'm going to get to create out of this? That's not always easy to sit in while you're in the pain and in the struggle, but to try and remember that, yeah, there's going to be opportunities that maybe wouldn't have come. Like, I think one of the biggest conflicts that Nathan and I ever have had in our relationship really did change the trajectory of where we were going.
Yeah, it did. And it's one of those things that at the time, yeah, like, yes, it was very uncomfortable, but looking back now, you go, would I change it? And I go, well, no, I wouldn't change it, because we probably had to go through that conflict. We probably had to be a little bit unkind to each other maybe in that conflict as well to get the impact that I needed and you as well to change and to implement new things and to do conflict better afterwards. And so it's all kind of led us to be at this place that we were. I always do find it difficult to reflect on like, oh, what would have you done differently, or what would you tell your past self about whatever relationships or things like that. Because I really do think that, yeah, you need some of that layering to be able to become the person that you are. And trying to learn a lesson by someone telling you something is one thing, I guess, but actually going through the pain yourself and experiencing things, or going through the emotions, or discovering something by yourself, it is so different to learning something on paper or by different means.
Yeah, and I now reflect on that like conflict that we had as like one of the best gifts we've ever been given, because it really did change a lot of things for us. So thank you for sharing it. And I think that's probably why I phrased that question for both of you. Is like, what lesson did you learn from that experience that you've carried into this one? Not like, what would you go back and change or do differently? Like, no, what are you taking forward?
I love that you phrased it that way. I actually had an interview for LinkedIn Audio. I knew the people that are interviewing me. They're part of this community that I pop in and speak at. And one of the questions they asked in particular is, what was your biggest failure professionally, right? And I actually went in and I gave an example of one of my major failures, but that was really the lesson because they said, well, would you do it differently? And do you wish you could go back? And I said, no, I am the person today who that experience carved out. And I am so glad I am the person I am today. But I had to really go through those lessons because those failures are the ones that taught me. Those failures are the ones that created. And again, that's why we don't say, we had failed marriages. They're practices for us. They've given us the steps to how we are choosing to show up now, how we are choosing to be different in the relationship.
Yeah, such a gift. So if we can change directions a little bit, I would love to hear and learn a little bit more about your co-founder status of this baby that you created of Go Confidently Services. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you do now.
At the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people lost their income, lost their jobs, and we weren't immune from this. And that's when she started her podcast. And at the same time, she started her own business, which she has wanted to do for a very long time, but didn't quite have the push to do. Well, perfect time.
That push or that opportunity, yeah.
So I was like, what does this mean for us? All right, I'm going to help. Well, that changed quickly. I got very involved. So we've learned a lot about each other since. I've never brought up the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are For Venus, until we started working together and realized that, yeah, we are very different people. Julie's big picture. I'm minutia, detail. And I think that actually helps us out. But we have to learn more about each other. And I think if we didn't have that relationship where we didn't listen to each other before that, that could have been very bad. The saying is, you never work with family. That sometimes can be a very difficult thing. You have to have that relationship of communication. And I found that we did well. We were lucky we had that foundation there.
I'm not easy to work with.
There are times that are frustrating, but she'll know if I need a minute. I know if she needs a minute. When I don't know, she knows a minute, needs a minute. And I try to fix things that she just wants me to know are broken, but she says, don't fix it yet. I need a minute to sit in my dirty diaper.
Well, the thing is, I think that as being co-founders, right? I knew I was going to take this path. And certainly I was waiting, well, in 5 years, I'm going to start to step away from my role and start to do more. But when the call came to say, hey, we need to separate, we need to do this, I knew it was the right thing for the company. And I knew I needed to go forward. And I've been very independent my whole life. I'm an oldest child. My first job was at, I don't know, 12. So it was very easy for me to just begin to figure out what was next for me. The thing that surprised me is that I didn't have to do it alone. That's the beauty of having a loving partner in life, that you don't have to do it alone. And for many years of my life, it's always been about me figuring it out, doing it alone. I had to do that in my growing up. I had to do that in my marriage, my first marriage. So the fact that I have this, and it's not that he has skill set that I needed or that benefit the growth of the company, but it's that this is ours. We're building it together. And I don't have to do it alone. And I get to do it with him. I get to do it in a way in which we are, again, we didn't have any children, but we're giving birth to this brand new endeavor in which it's a little bit of him. It's a little bit of me.
Well, the thing is, it started out as me supporting Julie in her coaching business. And as she's making contacts with people and making incredible friends and business business partners, she's like watching me do my thing and noticing a talent that I may have, things that I can do and things I'm helping her with. And all of a sudden she's like, oh, maybe Dan can help you with that. And that's turned into a partnership.
I really like that you shared that, because I think often we don't get to see our partner in their professional selves. And often we do have like other elements to our personality or our working style and that kind of thing. And I feel like that was one of the gifts of Nath and I starting this podcast, is that I got to see Nath go through this evolution of tools and resources and learning and new skill development that I'd never seen before. And we'd never really collaborated together on a project this big outside of like probably moving states and our wedding.
And organising our
we're
wedding.
Probably and our like really big overseas travel. Like those were probably like the really big projects where we've, collaborated, budgeted, had to work together. There's a clear outcome that we're trying to achieve together. But this was such a gift. And then I think it was amplified because Nathan started working at home across that global pandemic. And then all of a sudden I got to hear his work voice. And I was like, who is this person? What?
Shocking, right?
What?
Bit of a different persona.
Yeah, you do have you definitely have a different work persona. Like, I still feel like it's still authentically you. I don't think it's a different person. It's just another part of you that I'd never spent time with before.
Yeah.
So I really love that you've shared that, and that there was this whole other evolution for you as well as you created a podcast, which is how it was for us too. Julie, I'd love to ask about your book, So Confident You, Simple Habits to Live the Life You've Imagined. Tell us a little bit about how the book came about and what you do with it now.
I started to interview women because throughout my corporate career, and even now working with women and helping them build a business, the biggest thing that I get from individuals is like, hey, you're so confident. I wish I was as confident as you are. And yes, there is a level of confidence. There is a level of extroversion, but I don't have my shit together all the time. I know that a lot of women struggle with confidence, but when it comes to confidence, I am a firm believer that confidence comes specifically from having that innate feeling that you did it, you got it done. The more that you do a task, the more confident that you become. The more confident you feel, the more motivated you are at doing the task. And the more motivation you have, then the more that you continue to show up, practice, gain more skill. So it's everything interconnected. And I started to just look at the habits that I've acquired in my life and how those habits have made me successful in different areas of my life. And then I started to see that it's not like I was born with these habits. I had to learn them. But in many cases, I learned them from other incredible women and one guy, not you, that have really poured into me and taught me and helped me and gave me an example. And yet many of the women who I work with now are never going to meet my dad, are never going to meet my grandmother or my boss who passed away. But what they will get to do is learn some of the habits that help them be more confident, show up in their life. And they're going to learn them because I'm sort of that person that is sharing my habits, that so they in turn will get those habits as well. So the book is the different stories of these amazing, incredible individuals who I admire. What are the habits that they use to become more confident, be successful in life, and really begin to live that life that they love? So that's how the book came about. And it's very rewarding for me to be able to know that the individuals that have gone, that are part of the book, live on, and the individuals that read the book that all of a sudden are inspired by seeing that it doesn't take, an extraordinary person. It just takes a person who is committed to showing up and doing the thing even after you fail. And that's what habits are all about.
So when you were going through this process of writing the book and unpacking all these habits that you picked up from all these people along the way, so what did you learn about creating habits in our own lives, and what's the kind of the foundations to actually starting to create good habits or habits that we're trying to instill in our lives?
Nate, that's an excellent question. So I am a Tiny Habits certified coach. So I can talk about habits all day.
I've read Tiny Habits, BJ Fogg.
Yay, I'm so glad. It makes my heart happy that you've read it. I read Tiny Habits and I've heard Dr. Fogg speak, and I thought, I need to learn more and really implement this. And those are the things that I've learned. I'm going to give you just a quick top level so that the listeners can walk away with something that can help them. Number one is we don't change because we're motivated. Now, I did talk about that motivation comes after you have done the thing and you feel good, right? But that's not the first step to start off with when you're trying to create a new habit. January 1st, all of us think that we're very motivated to go to the gym and that's what's going to keep us there. It's not. What's going to keep us is the feel-good shine that we get from celebrating that we did the thing. But in order to do the thing, you have to pick the very tiny thing, something that's so doable that when you marry it with an existing behavior, it sort of takes hold. In order for you to create a habit, there's got to be one, the behavior that you want to create, the motivation, the ability, and the prompt. So find the different prompts in your life. As humans, we automate most of our behavior. So all of that are habits that we already have. So find the habit that you already have, create a tiny behavior adjacent to that. And then when you actually do your behavior, your new habit with the prompt, then celebrate it. And then your brain's going to say, ooh, we like that. We should keep doing that. And like plants, habits begin to grow and expand. But the real big thing is to always celebrate your wins, to always notice and not go for big or go home, but create that tiny incremental 1% change, because at the end of the day, that's what really creates traction.
I think one of the best things that I've learned about creating habits, building habits, maintaining habits is that often we get these like surge of desire for things to be different. And then we want to go and change everything all at once. And it's like, all right, I'm going to use like losing weight because it's just such a relatable thing of like, you know, I'm going to change my exercise, my routine, my food. I'm going to throw all this stuff out. And you want to do all of the things all at once. Whereas if you just went, do you know what, I'm going to focus on until I've got this habit nailed is like my step count. I'm just going to move this one needle on this one thing. And once I've got that embedded, living it, breathing it, it's on default, it's now just the way that I do things, then I'm going to move the next thing. Then I'm going to build the next thing, and these little building blocks. Whereas I don't think that that's always necessarily the way that we approach a desire for change. And we want to, I think it's like, must be like the movie montage that we've all seen. It's like the instant transformation that we all, you know, have been led to believe is possible. But it's incremental change, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that the other thing too that people forget is that we are going to fail. And if you think, okay, well, I failed, let's go back and start again. And this is why you want to create something so tiny that it doesn't require you to be motivated to do it. So if you're looking to start walking, it's not about, I'm going to walk out the door and go walk a mile, walk 2 miles when you haven't been walking at all. It's about, you know what, today I'm going to put my gym shoes on. And tomorrow, maybe I'll walk out to my mailbox and back. But you make it so incrementally easy to do that you're just celebrating and going forward, seeing that there is hope. And then what happens is you become that person that does the habit. You start to assume that identity, and that's a great motivator as well to create the behavior and the life you want.
Yeah. So one of the habits that Nathan and I are working on this year, and I feel like this is like one that is like, oh, it's just our nemesis, is a consistent bedtime, good hygiene around going to bed at a reasonable hour with digital sunsets. And we just have not been able to nail this habit, right? And then it's like self-sabotages us because it's like, then the morning's not great because the night wasn't great and the night wasn't great. Yeah. So maybe we just need to, because we're trying to do the like, all right, we're going to get to bed at this time and we're going to wake up at this time. Maybe we need to drop it and just be like, do you know what, we're just going to...
You want me to help you create a recipe that you can stick to?
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's workshop it. Tell us, Julie, where do we start?
Okay, the first thing that you're going to do is create a prompt. Find the anchor moment in your day at night. Like, what do you do at bedtime? What are you doing before you go to bed? So whatever it is that you're doing, you're going to find the behavior going to bed. You're going to marry it to that existing behavior. I will tell you, I was terrible at bedtime. I still, for the most part, I'm not great. But one of the anchor or prompts that I've created is I have an alarm on my phone and it will say, hey, it's bedtime. And it's 9 p.m., which for a night owl, it's like, ooh, I was going to dinner at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
But what starts to happen is then I start to wind down. Right. And it's not like I go to bed, but I'm starting to, rather than going upstairs at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I'm starting to wind down to get closer to bed earlier. That would be my first suggestion. And then when you guys, if your alarm goes off and says, hey, start to wind down, or let's go upstairs to read, then you celebrate that.
I feel like there's so few people who relate to this because I don't know any of our friends who struggle with this. Like, they're all like, what do you mean? You just get tired and you go to bed. And I'm like, I wish it was that simple for me. I get tired and I'm like, let's go down a YouTube rabbit hole for another 3 hours. Like, I just really resist bedtime even when I'm tired.
I think you're a lot worse than I am.
I'm so much worse than Nath.
Yeah.
So much worse. And then I drag you into it. And then like...
I'm with you though, Sammy. I'm with you.
It's my strongest talent is falling asleep at night.
Yeah, Dan is good.
Deep jealousy, Dan.
Actually, falling asleep is one of my greatest talents as well. I'll hop into bed and I'll be asleep in 2 minutes.
I know, and then it makes me angry. I'm like, how are you asleep already?
Her too. She gets mad. She's actually woken me up.
I know, that's
Said,
so...
"Hey, are you sleeping on purpose?"
Oh, you do that all the
I
time. You're
know.
like angry at
I
me.
know, it's so irrational, isn't it? It's like...
It's not fun.
That, why,
Yeah.
yeah. But isn't that funny? Like the self-awareness, we know that this is something that we need to work on. I know that this is something that's getting in my way. And I've probably known that this is like a real hurdle for me. Like it's probably like 5 years now, 4 years. It's been really problematic. And I used to have a job where I needed to be at a certain place at a certain time, and it was like mission critical. And then I would have anxiety about oversleeping. And then I think that created a lot of like anxiousness around going to sleep, being able to sleep, waking up. And then I just don't think I've broken that pattern since I created it. And here we are years later where it doesn't matter what time, you know, I don't have to be anywhere at a particular time most of the time. And I'm still got this legacy issue around, you know, the hygiene of my sleep. But I think that is really important to just highlight, like how much our habits can make or break our life and what it is that we're trying to create. So I'm really curious, like, you know, you're on a podcast about relationships and you're a habits expert. So tell us, what are some of the healthy habits or great habits you've got in your own romantic relationship to keep it fueled up?
Well, one of my tiny habits, as a matter of fact, I was finding that I was very grumpy towards Dan in the last few months. And if we go back to what we talked about in the beginning, I realized that this is not his responsibility. He's not responsible for making me happy or making me less grumpy. It really was something that I needed to take a hold of. So I started to figure out, right, okay, what can I do? So rather than being grumpy at him or you're sleeping, wake up, or are you sleeping, or taking it out on him, one of the things that he has sleep apnea. So he has to put his little Darth Vader machine on. And when he does that, I typically will quietly, you know, think of 1, 2, maybe 3 things that I am so grateful about for Dan.
I'm a prompt.
You are a prompt.
Nice.
So, and to me, that makes me appreciative of him. And, you know, like I'll look in and sometimes I'm like, okay, he came home and he helped me with that, or he went and got dinner, or he fed the dogs, or he put his machine on. Maybe he won't snore that loud, right? So these little things, or he helped me make the bed this morning. We take for granted the mundane moments in life. And like it would be so easy to be the person who spends her time crabby because his very large shoes are in the way and I'm going to trip over them. Rather than focusing on that, I can say, wow, you know what? I'm so glad Dan is here and his shoes are in the way. And it's like a reminder that he's here.
One of the things that I've changed, when I get home from work, a lot of times I'd go and watch some TV and just relax a little bit before I would come in and do things for the business. And she'll be in here sometimes quite late. And I realized that if I were to come home and my prompt is, I'm home, I come in here and I do a half hour, an hour worth of work. I know her love language is doing, you know, small acts of service. And I know me coming in here and sitting down and doing a little bit of work brightens her day. And again, her happiness isn't contingent on me making her happy, but that makes her happy. And that's something that you can do if you know what makes your partner happy. And if it's tiny little things, you can build that in.
And in turns, when he comes in, like he'll go in and sit down and I may be in the middle of like either coaching a client or just finished an interview or need to create some content. Then I know that his tendency would be to want to just go and relax and chill and do the thing. But then I get up from the desk, I walk over and I'll say, hi, honey, or give him a kiss. And just because touch is his love language.
Because she knows my love language.
Right?
Creates that moment of connection.
And it's that moment in which, you know, and I remember when we started dating, I'll never forget, we were at a bar with a bunch of friends. And I remember we looked at each other from across the room, right? And then like we knew, like we have this unspoken language. And as a couple, you can create that. But many times we let the white noise of life erase that or interfere with that connection. So find the little moments where you can reconnect with very little effort, but that has large impact.
And I want to reiterate what you're saying here about that, creating that habit. But that is also research backed by John and Julie Gottman, who talk about this idea of the 5 magic hours, and that they're, really incredible relationships invest these 5 hours into their relationship every week. And it's not a 5-hour block. It's made up of these little micro moments. And one of those micro moments is parting. So giving warm farewells and re-greeting. So that 2 minutes that it takes to say goodbye, or that 2 minutes that it takes to welcome home, it puts goodwill into the bank of those 5 magic hours. So I really like that you've acknowledged that habit and how much that can set the tone for then your evening that you're going to spend together. So I really like that. Thank you so much for sharing. So if there was one other thing that maybe you do to keep your relationship with yourself fueled up, I'd love to hear one from each of you.
So the one thing that we do and we understand is allowing each other to have their friends in their space. So I've been in a golf league for years. So Thursday night, she knows I'm going to be in that golf league. And it didn't happen this year. But if I say, hey, my buddy Mike wants to go out, she's like, go. Got to make sure to be with your friend and have that. And if she's got a girls' night, or what do you guys do? I don't know what you guys do, but she can do it.
We go to the spa.
And it's okay.
We go to the winery.
And it's okay. So for me, it's good to have a relationship where you're good and you can allow. Yes, I allow you to go out.
Create space.
Yeah.
Create space.
Create space.
Yeah. And I think that's very key. For me, the one thing that I would say is very important in our relationship is that we come with a wealth of background behind us. Not only our first marriages, but our families. We come from very different families. And the fact that we have embraced, and his family is incredible to me. His family is so loving and accepting. And the same way my mom probably loves him more than she loves me.
Absolutely, she does.
And I think that, and even if that was not the case, the fact that we are inclusive of each other's worlds and allow each other to be who we are without the expectation that we're going to change each other is very important. It's sort of like a dance. If you don't keep dancing, you lose the rhythm. So you have to, kind of keep practicing to kind of okay, who's leading or who picks the song? And I think that you have to be willing to let your partner pick the song every so often.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's such a great analogy. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really beautiful conversation, letting us have a little peek behind the curtains of, your love story and now your marriage. But to say thank you, we've given a year's worth of seeds to help a family grow some really nourishing food in Malawi. So this has been a conversation and a gift that we'll keep on giving. So thank you so much.
You guys, I love it. Thank you so much. I have to tell you, the funniest thing is when I filled out the intake form without Dan. And when he went through the form, he's like, I know exactly what you picked.
Zero hunger. Yeah, it's a fundamental of the United Nations global goals. It's incredibly important for all of us to have access to food. So that's been made possible via our giving partner, Buy One, Give One. And the project is looked after by Every Home Global Concern. So thank you so much.
You guys, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for creating an impact in the world, not only in the lives of the listeners that are tuning in and hearing these conversations, that they can walk away and say, maybe I'll try that in my life, right? But also for allowing other individuals around the world who may never meet you have a better life because of the large impact that you're creating with a small step. So thank you so much for doing that. We so appreciate you. It's an honor to have people interview us together. So thank you.
Thank
No
you.
worries.
Thank you.
So Julie and Dan, if people want to connect with you or learn a little bit more about what you do or want to get your book, how can they do that?
The best way to connect with me is I am Julie DeLucca-Collins on all of the social media platforms, and that's how you can find Dan as well. Or you can do #HandsomeHotHusband and you'll find him as well. But the website is goconfidentlycoaching.com.
Awesome.
And you can hear our podcast on
All the platforms. That is Casa DeConfidence, It is our home. It is our place. And you can come and find new ways in which you can be inspired and find how you yourself can learn the lessons from others on how to go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Yeah, amazing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sammy and
Thank you.
Nathan.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.